Thank you, Madam Acting Speaker. I rise to speak for the Greens on the Biosecurity Bill 2014. As we heard today, pests, disease, feral animals and noxious weeds are having a massive impact on native flora and fauna, both terrestrial and aquatic. Globally, invasive species have been recognised as the most serious threat to biodiversity after habitat loss. Along with habitat loss and climate change, they're one of the top three threats to Australian species. The impacts of pests and disease are also a significant burden on New South Wales agricultural industries. Weeds and pest animals are estimated to cost the New South Wales economy over $1.3 billion a year in losses to agricultural production and the cost of control measures. And in my area, as we heard from the member for Clarence, it is vital for our economic sustainability, in particular our dairy industry, and right across the board, so many agricultural industries in my area. And this, of course, this cost does not include impacts on biodiversity, landscape, tourism and water.
Macadamia industry.
Macadamias, yes, the Minister's absolutely right.
Avocado.
Yes, all the good things.
Good nuts.
Madam Acting Speaker, my colleague in the upper house talked about what characterises a good biosecurity framework. And if we were to give a report card, and I do lament, and I note that the Minister here, the hard work that she did in the past, and I lament that the amendments which would have been there broke down in terms of that process. But the report card would not be a school grade pass. What characterises a good biosecurity framework is nil tenure. We see that. Independence and scientific rigour. Independence is a concern. A focus on risk prevention, not just management. Transparency and accountability, and that is missing. Well resourced, there's questions about how this moves forward in the future. The involvement of the community and key stakeholders, I believe that was done, and a focus on both environmental and agricultural protection. We believe that the agricultural protection is there, but the environmental is not as strong. The government has, unfortunately, what we have before the House is a bill which goes halfway towards fixing up our biosecurity system, but fails when it comes to independence, transparency, scientific rigour and accountability. This is a bureaucrat's bill, unfortunately, that over time will see the resources needed to give it teeth gradually dwindling. Since this government came to office, we've seen 50 biosecurity staff cut from the Department of Primary Industries, as $5.6 million has been removed from biosecurity services. For this reason, this bill has absolutely nothing which holds the government to account for its performance when it comes to biosecurity. The bill contains lots of provisions which allow the government to hold private landholders and other individuals to account when it comes to discharging their biosecurity responsibility, but there are no provisions which hold the government accountable for its own performance. The Greens took a strong and detailed policy platform to the election, which would have given this legislation the teeth it requires to be effective. 1, the establishment of a $5 million high-risk incursion response fund. The introduction of a 3-yearly state of biosecurity reporting. The adoption of a permitted list approach to the sale of plants, which would make so much more sense than the blacklist approach that we have. If you're a nursery owner at the moment and you want to sell a plant and you're not sure whether you can, whether it's legal or not, the process that we've seen in other jurisdictions is so much better because you can actually see the permitted plants rather than those plants that are illegal, so you can make sure. The establishment of an independent statutory state biosecurity committee and the joint responsibility for biosecurity to be given to both the agriculture and environment ministers. I lament, and the Greens lament, that those amendments did not carry or would have not been brought back by the minister in the other place. Before the election, the Greens drafted and negotiated with the government on a raft of amendments to the bill which would have seen this. These were supported by both the New South Wales Farmers Association and the Invasive Species Council. The government agreed to these amendments, but as I have said, Madam Acting Speaker, that process broke down. We welcome the fact that the Labor Party adopted these amendments, but it It is a shame that the National Party have since dropped every one of these amendments from this latest version of the bill. The amendments, Madam Acting Speaker, that we agreed to would have ensured the precautionary principle to be applied in biosecurity decision-making, which would be, in my view, futuristic and incredibly in line with other countries. It would have seen the establishment of a state biosecurity committee made up of independent experts, environmental and farming stakeholders and government officials, which would have reported on compliance by government agencies with their obligations, prepared 4-yearly reports on the state of biosecurity in New South Wales, made recommendations to the Minister about prohibited matter, promoted a coordinated strategic approach to biosecurity issues, reviewed the biosecurity aspects of any local strategic plans prepared by local boards under the Local Land Services Act 2013, and provided feedback to the Minister as to whether these are consistent with state policy. So there would have been it would have covered the field. It would also have provided policy advice on biosecurity issues when requested to do so by the Minister. And finally, the amendments would have created the chair of the State Biosecurity Committee as an independent statutory office with the power to audit public sector compliance with the provisions of the Biosecurity Act. What this bill does not do is provide powers for the Environment Minister or provide transparency and accountability. It does not provide clear scientific rigour and independence in decision-making. It's adopted a permitted list approach to the sale of plants. It has not adopted a permitted list. It has established a high-risk incursion response fund. It has not established a high-risk incursion response fund as recommended by the Natural Resources Commission, and it has not given any confidence that the government will provide the resources necessary to ensure the biosecurity system functions effectively. The bill has ignored many of the key aspects of the Natural Resource Commission review of weed management in New South Wales, and has also ignored the key premise of the Beale review federally, which is that the biosecurity system should be run independent of government like the Bureau of Meteorology. That is why the bill as it stands will not be supported by the Grants.
I report